Discuss with Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Litigation Analyst Elliott Stein. Thanks so much for joining us here on set, Elliott. You know, the Grayscale conversion is something that a lot of people in both crypto and the ETF world are really fascinated by. What do we need to know about how soon this can happen?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, when you say there's a ruling coming today, it's not really a ruling, it's just a procedural formality. If you recall, the three-judge panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals in D.C. Ruled against the SEC at the end of August, basically vacated the SEC's rejection of Grayscale's application to convert GBTC to a spot Bitcoin ETF. The SEC had the opportunity up until last week to seek further review of that with the full D.C. Circuit. The SEC didn't take that opportunity. So what happens today is just that the court issues what's called a mandate. And all that does is it takes the jurisdiction of the court off the table. The case is out of that court's jurisdiction, and this issue goes back to the SEC. The SEC does have an opportunity to ask the Supreme Court for review at the end of November. That would be the deadline. I don't see them doing that. So it's really back in the SEC's court, so to speak. And it's going to be a discussion now, I think, between the SEC and Grayscale as to what the process is next.
And Elliott, I know in some of the research you've been doing, you've talked about the key word of clarity, and obviously the market is very closely watching all of this. Are there degrees of clarity? I mean, you laid out a few different things there. Does, at the very least, some of what we've seen unfold provide more clarity?
Well, the big issue as to clarity in crypto right now is sort of like what kind of digital assets are securities and which ones are commodities. That's not what the Grayscale case is about. The Ripple case.
That's the Ripple case.
That's the Ripple case. It's the Coinbase case. It's the Binance case. It's the Terraform case. That issue is percolating in a lot of different cases.
Well, they lost the Ripple case.
They didn't. So neither side really lost it completely, right? Because the SEC won on institutional sales and can collect up to about $730 million. That's what's going to happen next. They're going to figure out what the remedy is for how much Ripple has to disgorge and what kind of penalty they might have to pay.
So to me, that's more of a procedural ruling, right? The judge said you can't do this in sales to institutions, or you can't do whatever they did in the institutional sales procedure was wrong. But they still aren't considered, Ripple, their coins aren't considered a security by this judge, as they were by the SEC. So to me, that's really a win for Ripple.
I would say it's a win for the industry because the court rejected the SEC's view of things and subscribed to the industry's view, which is that you have to differentiate between the underlying digital asset and the transaction in which that asset is sold, right? And that's really the main takeaway from the Ripple ruling. XRP, the digital asset that Ripple issued, itself is not a security. But in that case, when it was sold to institutional investors directly, you apply the Howey test, you apply the 4 factors, that met the elements of a security, but the programmatic sales that were on public exchanges, mostly to retail investors, didn't meet those elements. So you sort of have to look at the transaction, and it doesn't mean that the underlying asset itself is a security.
But the SEC isn't going to push that any further.
Well, no. What they did yesterday by dropping their claims against the individuals is that they can now sort of push up the timeline for appealing these issues. And I would expect appeals by the SEC on the programmatic sales, and I would expect an appeal by Ripple on the institutional sales. But first, they have to figure out how much Ripple is going to pay the SEC on the institutional sales.
This is fascinating stuff, and I hope
you'll
come back and join us. You should join us next Tuesday on the Crypto Show.
I'm around.
With me and Kaylee Lines. Elliott, thanks so much for coming on the program. Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Litigation Analyst Elliott Stein talking to us about crypto cases.